What's up, guys? Today I'm going to show you a very interesting game that features a Danish gambit, a piece sacrifice, attempted checkmate that was thwarted, and ultimately this interesting endgame where there's 4 pawns against the bishop. And of course, if you get bored with the video, you can always check out Mario behind me, but let's get started. All right, so here's the game. I'm playing as black. Here we go. So my opponent is playing the Danish gambit. Now, if you accept the gambit and just keep taking the pawns, usually white plays bishop c4, then you take, they play bishop b2, and you can see we're only on move 5, and it's already pretty scary for black. White has a lot of development. Both bishops are aimed at the king side. There's all sorts of tactical ideas, queen d5, queen b3, knight can come out very quickly. It's very dangerous for black. Now, that being said, it's certainly playable, and if you know what you're doing, you can get away with this. I haven't really studied this too much, and I don't know like too much of the theory. So one of the easiest things to do against the Danish gambit, and this actually in general, okay, in any openings when your opponent plays the move c3, if you're black in these e4, e5 openings, a lot of times it's a good idea to strike with d5. It's just a very principled approach, and the main idea is that the knight can't go there and harass your queen. Right? So what happened in the game, takes, and of course white would love to be able to play knight c3 and chase away my queen, but they can't because the pawn's there. And so that's kind of the idea. It's a very easy way to equalize and lets both of your bishops out right away. Queen's in a good square, and the game goes on. So that's what I played, and my opponent captured, and I just simply started developing some pieces. And that knight went ahead and castled. I like to castle queenside in these lines just because it puts a lot of pressure on that isolated d-pawn. And so if white's not careful, sometimes you can win a pawn here. So my opponent played knight to c3, attacking my queen, and I played queen h5, getting away from the knight and anticipating that my opponent wanted to castle kingside, and I'm getting ready to attack. Now, if you're wondering why I didn't play bishop b4 and pin the knight, it's because white's probably going to castle next move anyway. And after they do that, the pin is gone. So I have to move my queen again, or I have to give up my bishop for the knight. And I don't really want to do that because now that weak d4 pawn is no longer weak. It's opening a file on my king. White might even be able to use this pawn to push forward, and just really doesn't make a lot of sense. And then if I just move my queen now, I have to ask the question, did I really want my bishop over on b4 if there's no pin there? And I think the answer is probably not. It probably could, be better somewhere else. So that's why I decided, instead of pinning it, to just go ahead and move my queen right here. So I went over to h5. My opponent did castle, and now you can see instead of the bishop being on b4, I was able to put it on d6, and I have a much more aggressive position. I'm immediately threatening to take the knight. Let's just say black makes a bad move, right? I'm going to take the knight, and it's game over. I got checkmate next move, right? So that's the idea. And so, of course, my opponent saw that, happening and played h3, which is a good move to stop the checkmate. So this is pretty common. If you have your queen and bishop over here on the king side and they play h3 to chase it away, of course, you can move it somewhere to save the bishop. Or what I like to do a lot of times is sacrifice. Stockfish usually says it's not good enough, but you do get a very aggressive position and an attack on the king. Stockfish says, actually, which is interesting, knight to f6 is the best move. So a different way to sacrifice the piece. You don't always have to just take a pawn. You can sacrifice a piece like this by bringing your knight out, allowing white to capture, because then our knight comes in. And again, we have some very serious threats on h2 if white goes for that. So nice idea by Stockfish. But in the game, I just took it, and we get this position. Now, this position actually isn't bad for me at all. I have some nice attacking chances. But let me just show you the reason. Well, actually, this is a good moment for you guys to pause. After I took this, white had a very strong move that I didn't see, and they didn't see either, okay, because obviously they didn't play it. They took my bishop. But there was another move that white could have played here. If you want to pause and think through, what was white's best move in this position, and what's the idea behind it? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, the best move for white is knight to g5. And basically, the idea is, okay, now I have to do something with my queen because the bishop's attacking it. I can't take this because it's defended. And after I move my queen, let's just say queen h4, well, now white's going to simply take my bishop with the knight. And guess what? I didn't even open up the king like I wanted to. The whole point of me sacrificing there was I wanted to get rid of those 2 pawns and attack the king. By white throwing in this little trick, I didn't even do that. Yeah, I can keep trying to attack and maybe push my pawns, but it's already not looking good for me at all, right? So, keep that idea in mind. I didn't even see it. My opponent didn't see it and just took it, but that would have completely basically ended the game if they did that. But we go on, and now I have a nice little threat here. And if I can figure out a way to get rid of the knight, then there's the checkmate. So white played knight e4, I think trying to trade off my bishop and get rid of that bishop because that's a very strong attacking piece. Queen to g4 check, and what I'm doing now is forking the pieces. But white can actually save the knight by going to g3. The problem with that is now I can take it and get another pawn and open up white's king even further, but they have to do that, right? Because if they move, well, then I'm just taking the knight for free. So I have to play here allowed me to do this trade, and now you can see white's king is very exposed. No pawns are left to defend it, and I have to just figure out now how can I get some more pieces over there to attack white's king. So I played knight f6, just kind of following principles, finished my development, threatening to potentially go to g4 with some nice threats like this. Also, maybe e4 could come in handy. And if I need to, I can use this rook, and just a good move in general to play, right? Knight f6. Queen e8, or queen e1, sorry. So obviously white would like to trade queens, because if white can trade queens, the threat of me checkmating the king goes down significantly. So I don't really want to trade queens if possible. But I noticed a little idea. Now, Stockfish is telling me I should have actually just went queen h3 check. But in the game, I played knight to e4. And the reason is, if white tries to trade like they want to, well, now I'm getting a fork. Actually, it's a triple fork on these pieces, and white's in trouble. They're going to move. I'm going to get this bishop for free. I'm going to take this next. And I have all these extra pawns. Easy win in the endgame, right? So white can't actually trade queens. So they played knight to g5, which is a good move. It's opening up the rook. And it's attacking my knight, because if I, for example, tried to take this, well, now my knight's no longer defending my queen. White's going to simply take that and I lose. So, white was kind of forcing me to trade queens in a weird way. And for example, if I try to move my queen away, let's just say back here, well, now my knight's going to be hanging. And I don't really have a good place to move it to that defends the knight. Like, there's just no available squares. See how the rook and the bishops are kind of just covering everything? I can't move my queen somewhere that also defends the knight. And so because of that, even though I didn't want to, I was forced to take the queen. Rook captured. And then I decided to go ahead and just trade some stuff. Played f6. And, I noticed that after f6, I was stopping the threat here with tempo. And the next move, I'd be able to take this pawn. And I said, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4 pawns against a piece. It seems like I'll have decent chances at the end game. So that's what happened. And then we get this position. So very interesting. I think this is actually relatively equal. But, in a blitz game with only a minute on the clock, I felt like it was going to give me good chances. It's probably going to be pretty difficult for white to defend. And the key feature about this end game, well, I'll go ahead and show you. We actually did just trade a bunch of rooks here. The key feature is that my pawns are so nice. Okay, the pawn structure is great. I don't have any isolated pawns. I don't have any doubled pawns. I don't have any backward pawns. Because of that, that's why I have a very nice advantage. Also, white's king is kind of far away. If white's king was sitting like right here in this position, it'd be a different story, right? But both of our kings are kind of far, and I have time to sort of maneuver my pawns around. So what side of the board do you think I focused on in this position? Here or here? Well, I actually focused on here because this is where my passed pawns are. And so I felt like this is where generally speaking, in end games, you want to focus on the side of the board where you have the pawn majority. Where do you have more pawns against less pawns? Well, I have 3 against 0, so it's over here, right? Now, I still have 3 against 2, which is nice, but it's going to be a lot of pushing and a lot of work to even get one passed pawn. Why not just go where I have 3? So that's what I did. And I started by bringing the king forward, right? You always want to activate your king in the end of the game. My opponent obviously knew that as well. And so we're both just making a beeline for the center of the board. Now, I got there a little bit first, which is nice. Also, I landed, or I put my king on a square opposite my opponent's bishop so that they can't do anything. So bishop goes here. And now I started advancing my pawns, but I wanted to do it carefully. And usually, if you're going against a bishop like this with a couple of pawns, what you want to be careful of is doing something like let's say I would have played h6 here. Putting all your pawns on the opposite color is a little bit risky because then maybe white could have played here. And notice how this bishop's now stopping these pawns. And if I, let's just say, I don't know, played a random move over here and allowed white to get some sort of blockade like this, you know, I can't advance any of these pawns. Now, I can still probably win this game because I have another one over here. But this is what I was trying to avoid, right? I didn't want to allow white to get a blockade like that, okay? So that's why I played f5, right? Because the pawn, if a pawn's on the same color as the bishop, I always know it's going to be easy to push it forward one more time, right? Because the next move forward is going to be on the opposite color. So whenever you can get them on the ones that are the same as the bishop, usually it's a good idea to do it. And I do have it defended, so that's important as well. You have to be careful that you don't do that and then they just get captured. In this case, I'm fine. Everything's defended. So the bishop comes back down here. h5, remember, I'm putting it on the white square because now I know, like, it can't be blockaded, and if it gets attacked, I can always at least push it forward once more. And there was no way for white to sort of infiltrate like this and blockade me, so I knew I was going to be able to get g5 next move if I need to, right? And there actually was one line that I did look at. If the bishop attacked me and I pushed it forward and it tried to blockade, I saw that I would be able to bring my king, attack it, and then play g5. Okay, so as long as you can keep your pawns kind of moving forward, that's what you want to do. So opponent went back here, g5, and notice how, you know, white's not able to make a blockade. So even here, the bishop can come there, but I'm okay. I can still push forward. Everything is covered, and it's just very difficult for white to do anything. And so I just moved the pawns forward, and here white just resigned. They're just not able to stop the pawns when my king is in such a good place. And there's no other counterplay, right, that I have to worry about. There's no pawns that white has that can do anything. I can just put all my pawns on dark squares, and what's white going to do? So nice little endgame. Hopefully you guys learned something from that one. It's a lot of fun when you get connected pawns and you're able to just push them. It's pretty rare. It doesn't happen a lot, but I wanted to show you guys this one. Hope you learned something. I'll see you over in this video where we talk about bishop endgames. Stay sharp, play smart. Take care.